When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 68. She Does It Messy, Transforming Fear into Fuel. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Rachael Abba. Rachael is a supreme guide and courage mentor to highly intuitive and creative people. She's in the business of supporting other highly intuitive people embrace their high sensing gifts as healing medicine. She's a spiritual thought leader whose training includes transpersonal experiential psychotherapy, medicine wheel facilitation, English literature and mythology, world religions, spiritual sciences, heart core leadership, and wealth consciousness mindset. Rachael's profound wisdom and guidance can inspire positive transformation and wealth generation in people's lives. She encourages individuals that she works with in becoming bold, feeling seen, and accepting themselves as whole, complete beings without judgment. Her unique healing modality supports clients in conscious practices of clarity, courage, compassion, and committed action to feel worthy, confident, productive, and powerful. She welcomes collaborations with other healers, creatives, and leaders committed to excellence and dynamic growth. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Hey, Rachael. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Thank you so much, Salima, for inviting me. I am thrilled to be here.
So glad you're thrilled because I'm thrilled also. Really excited to have this opportunity to have you be a guest on the show today. Rachael, I'm really grateful for your willingness to want to tell your story, that enthusiasm and the eagerness. It's a real joy for me to sit in. I really do feel blessed and honored to encounter guests such as yourself who really allow me to tap into their vulnerabilities and draw on their strengths and draw on their insight and inspiration. All of that comes from these stories and gets shared in this space. It's really important for me. I really believe it's important that we, together we take a stance to help break barriers of mental stigma and to keep that process going.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here and honored, and the feeling is mutual.
And so, Rachael, in case you're still wondering, this podcast, it's really all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And we know that no matter what the story, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away. And the gift of this platform, it serves in a way to break barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So today, together, My hopeful mission is that for both of us to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. And so, of course, I continue to bring forward a trend. It's called the mental beauty rethink. Rachel, I am really curious. Please tell me what first comes to mind for you when you hear this phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
Wow. Well, first of all, I love the idea of mental beauty. That is not
Mm-hmm.
something that, in my experience, I've seen. And what I hear is really a celebration of mental diversity, and
Mm-hmm.
it speaks to the unique pains and experiences we each have as being beautiful and valuable and most of all legitimate, right?
Mm-hmm.
That our minds are, they have a place in this world, and,
Mm-hmm.
they have value. So, and it plays into part of, what I believe in, which is accepting ourselves as whole and complete beings without judgment. And so, not judging our minds, and that
Mm-hmm.
embracing of self is truly healing.
I love it. The way you coined it, celebration of mental diversity. That is so cool. It's cool because I didn't think about it in that way. But even though that's the intention, right? So it's so nice that language can be so beautiful and uplifting,
Mhm.
and it really can, you know, um encourage different thought processes or crack open even further the way we're interpreting something, right?
Yes, yes, definitely it can.
Hmm. So thank you so much for, giving us that insight and that input. It's marvelous.
Thank you for coining the
Amazing.
term. Look at you.
Okay. Yeah, it just happened one day. It's one of those things where it just kind of
Just like, I
pops
just
up.
got a download of this inspiration, and
Yes,
you know what?
exactly. Exactly.
It's how
And I
you
was like,
roll.
that and you know what? It really tied in. It's like, okay, that was the missing piece of this mission, right? So
Yeah,
that's the part of that transformation and integration of the entire mission and intention of this podcast. So it's like, let's transform it now. Let's transform and, bring back to the community a new
powerful.
way. Yes. All right, Rachel. So, if you feel ready, we can get our interview going. So, let's unpack that story of yours. Without further ado, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
It would read, Supernatural woman comes out of hiding to tell all.
All right, say it one more time.
Supernatural woman comes out of hiding to tell all.
I can tell you're not hiding anymore because you're saying it with such vigilance and passion. So, supernatural woman comes out of hiding to tell all. Can you touch on what this title means for you?
Well, it speaks exactly what it says about the idea of hiding, right? And this has
Mm-hmm.
been an overriding theme in my
Mm-hmm.
life, and we're going to dive deeper into it. But the idea of coming face to face with myself and getting honest with who I am, and being
Mm-hmm.
bold enough to step out into the world and allow myself be seen,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what, because that matters, and my story is legitimate. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, stepping into my life and being front and center and leading from the front was very, very critical in my journey
Yeah. I mean, the theme of hiding and all of the other elements which you are now alluding to
as a master
is just,
hider, Selima.
yes. So, yeah, you were a master hider. You know what happens on this podcast, right?
Yes, I do.
So I think there was in a private conversation, the term excavation was used. So
Yes.
I think that's where we're about to go. Tell us what your untold story is all about.
Well, there's almost like several arms to it, but really at the
Okay.
heart of it, I would say began as a child, as a baby, where, and this is where the supernatural piece comes
Mhm,
in,
mhm,
and it's all around identity. Who am I?
mhm,
And who am I being in the world? Who am I expected to become? All of these expectations, and very clearly, right at the very beginning, I had awareness. right? As a
Mhm.
baby, I had awareness, and this was something that my mother later shared with me, that she felt very uncomfortable with me being alone with
Okay.
me, because there was
Mhm.
just something super creepy about me, because it's like I wasn't just like a regular baby, because I'm the youngest of four. So she had
Mhm.
been on this rodeo, like, she wasn't new. And she's
Mhm.
like, there's something odd about this one. And when I would look at her, I would do so unblinking. And it was like I was looking right through into her soul. And she just felt super vulnerable and like just exposed and
Mm.
fragile.
Mm. Mhm.
And so, and she also shared that, I did other things as well. I was very fond of doing a disappearing act where she
Okay.
would, as a baby, like I was just, a few months old, and,
Mhm.
she would leave to go somewhere, like just step out of the room and come back and I'd be gone. And she would search for like an hour for where,
Wow.
like under the bed, between the sheets. She's like, was she
Mhm.
abducted? And I'm a baby, I'm not moving anywhere, right? And so then
Mhm.
she'd be like, oh my, and then she'd pray, and then she'd come back into the room and I'd be there. So she started doubting her, like her mental,
Mhm.
faculties. And I did this often, including like other stuff. And I would just like, you know, and she was like, where are you going? Like, you're here now. You're in this realm. You're here now. So could you just please just stay? Like, just cut
Right.
it out. Wherever you're going, whatever meetings you're having,
Right.
just stop it. Right.
Right.
And
Okay.
so she, yeah.
Mhm.
And so she had
So
that
that's the
conversation with
message,
me.
and that's the
Sorry?
message you got from your mom. That's the message you got
Yeah,
from your
that's the
mom.
exactly. That was the
Mhm.
original messaging of, and she negotiated. And she's like, look, I get it. I know who you are. I see who you
Mhm.
are.
Mhm.
However, with everything going on and the way the world is and where we are,
Mhm.
because I was born in West Africa,
Okay.
Nigeria specifically.
Okay.
Yeah. And so she was like, not now. Like, Rachel, whatever this is, just like put it on a back burner and
Right.
let's just get through this together, because life is really tough right now.
Okay.
And so I just kind of looked at her and I guess I agreed. And I never did it again. That's how she
And
knew I had
okay.
agreed. So, yeah, so very early on, I got that message of who I am has no
Mhm.
place here,
Mhm.
right?
Okay.
And then I went on to meet my other siblings. I have two brothers and a sister, and so I lived with them with my dad for a while because my mom and dad had separated. And so we would play, they'd be like, let's play hide and go seek. Of course, my favorite game.
Right.
And so
So
I
when
would
you
do the same thing, not thinking that it was anything abnormal. And I
were
recall, like, I'd be in the room with them. I'm thinking,
mhm.
I'm right here.
Right,
And
so
I'd
it's
be looking
natural
at
for
them,
you. It
looking
was
for me.
natural for you. It was
Yes.
not okay, now just clarify one thing for me. So, when you said that then you had a chance to meet your 2 brothers and your sister and go to your dad's place, does that mean, like, when you were born, there were your other siblings weren't in the home with you?
Yes, they were not in their home. So my mom and my dad had separated when
Okay.
I was born. And
Okay.
so I never grew up with them in my
Until
babyhood
okay,
until later.
right.
So
So it
when I
was
was
you and mom.
5,
It was you and
sorry?
your mom. It was you and
Yes, it
your
was me
mom.
and my mom. Yeah, she was
Okay.
my buddy, my everything.
Okay.
And yeah, it was us against the world. And when I went to be in this new environment, this new community, again, that story of I don't belong here
Mhm.
continued. So I never felt safe and I never
Mhm.
felt at home, even at home.
Mhm.
I always felt as if, okay, like in a holding pattern, that there's
Right.
something else that will shift and then I will get
Mhm.
into
Mhm.
where I'm
Mhm.
supposed to be. And so I think I sense that I brought that with me into
Mhm.
this life where I'm like, I belong somewhere else, but I'm here on
Right.
assignment and it's temporary.
Mhm.
And then while I was here, my mom's like, okay. And then I go into another environment with my siblings. And again, okay, this is
Right.
temporary. It wasn't what it was, but I'll just, deal with it
Mhm.
until it
Mhm.
becomes normal, until I feel normal.
Right.
And so I never felt normal,
You just kept
even
waiting
with
for
that.
it.
I just kept waiting for something
Right.
to shift and
Right.
something to become okay.
Mhm.
And then I translated that into I wasn't okay, and I'm
Mhm.
waiting for something to shift in order for
Mhm.
me to become okay.
Mhm. Mhm. And so how
Yeah.
long did this pattern repeat itself again?
The pattern of not feeling settled
Yeah.
and not feeling well, this continued throughout my life up until recently, where I kept I was in a holding pattern, and I never felt. I always had that, in the pit of my stomach, that anticipating
Right.
the other shoe to drop, right? And so even when everyone around me, was well intentioned around welcoming me and putting me at ease, um, I didn't believe it because my mom had said it wasn't safe for me to be, and I
Mm.
believed her.
Right. So you got
So
that suggestion early on from your
very
mom.
early. Yeah, I was a few months old.
And so you really took it, like you really like took that to heart and embodied that and it was playing out in your mind even from such a
Yeah, I took it
young
on as
figure.
my assignment. Like I took
Mhm.
that on as, okay, this is how, like almost like that hypervigilance around
Mm.
it.
Mhm.
And I was going to be good about it. And I was going to be, I was going to succeed in my mission kind of thing.
Mhm.
I've been asked to do this, and boy, am I going to, excel at it because it was important enough for her to ask, right?
Mhm.
And I'm new here, so if she's telling me and I came
Right.
through her, then well, this new environment, it must be so, right? And so that
Mhm.
ended up like, informing how I showed up in relationship, how I showed up at school. I was never like I'd hold myself back. I never felt a part
Mhm.
of anything. I didn't do groups. I was like super lone wolfing life.
Mhm. Mhm.
As like, okay, no, I can't trust because I must depend on myself because, well, it's not safe. And so, as I said, it informed everything. But keep in mind that none of this was conscious. Like it wasn't as if I'm like, okay, I'm not going to trust this person now. It was more
Right.
of
Just an
my
internal,
template.
yeah, it was a template, like an internal,
Hmm.
just something you'd internalized. That
Yes.
must have felt really lonely for you.
It did. It did for a really long time, but then, even in that discomfort became normalized, where
Mhm.
I saw myself and then I saw the world. Like, and I never felt a part of it. No matter what was going on, I always felt like an outsider.
Mhm.
And I remember just watching people as a child, just observing them almost like, going out on safari and like
Mhm.
watching the animals in the wild and be like,
Right.
okay, and you
Right.
know, the family members in their natural habitat. It was like really, I never felt included
Mhm.
even when I was, because I didn't see myself in my environment, and I
Mhm.
and I never allowed myself to consider anything else because I there just never was for me, right? That's how I saw it through a child's eyes. That's
Mhm.
how I experienced it. That's how I saw it. And so um, that created this deep observation of my environment, and that,
Mhm.
as I mentioned, hypervigilance, right? I will
Mhm.
mentally record everything, and I had an extremely rich internal world,
Mhm.
right? And as I mentioned, the supernatural piece, at age, I believe, 5,
Mhm.
I was introduced to my almost like my spiritual mentor, which is
Mhm.
like an ethereal form. I saw them. They introduced themselves to me. I was at a birthday party and I was sitting alone because I wasn't playing with the other children because I'm like, what a waste of time. Right.
Right.
I was in my own, I didn't get
Mhm.
it. The world made no sense to me, Salima.
The way other children and your
Made
peers
no
and your friends
sense.
interacted, it just you were like, "Why would I
Yeah.
do this?
It made no sense to
What
me.
is fun about that?" Or, "Why would I enjoy
Yeah.
it?
I'm like,
Why are
why
they
would you
enjoying
be
that?" Right.
Yeah, it made no
Yeah.
sense.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right.
And even
Okay.
as my mom later shared, well, I shared with her once I got speech, because part of
Right.
the challenge for me and the frustration I felt being in this body was that as a baby, I felt all the baby things, right?
Mhm.
I felt as if I had gum in my mouth and I couldn't speak. I had like thoughts and ideas I wanted to express, and I'm like, why won't my mouth work?
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, so that's where the observation, I'm like, I'm going to record everything in my, and I was very unblinking. I wouldn't blink.
Mhm.
And my mom would literally blow in my face to get me to close my eyes because I didn't want to miss anything. And so the moment Salima I could speak, the moment I could speak, I was like, okay, sit down, listen to me, right?
Right.
This person who came over here and la, da, da, and this uncle da 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 and this brother but da, 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 and she was
And
like,
you had
what the
lots of stuff
hell?
to say. You had lots to say.
I had lots to say,
Mhm.
and she just like lost it because
Just blown
everything I was saying,
away.
she remembered it.
Yeah.
Right, she remembered it.
Okay.
I told her what I liked, what I didn't like. I'm like, and please do me a favor, stop trying to get people to carry me. I don't want to be held by XYZ. How
Wow.
annoying, and
Wow. It
and
all
I
came
would,
out.
it all came out, and she was like, and
Wow.
then she was like, oh my God, I wasn't losing my mind. She was weird. Right. Um, and so, yeah. And so then that became part of our relationship of,
Mhm.
bridging that gap between the ethereal realms and
Mhm. Mhm.
the physical
Right.
realms.
So, Rachel, tell me more about how you were affected, having gone through this journey of really tapping into your supernatural gifts and finding your voice and charting a path, feeling misunderstood for such a, large part of your life with this holding pattern that you described. Tell me more how you were affected maybe in later on in your life or in your adult years.
Well, I would say, I mean, it started with a lot of stomach issues. Like, I had a lot of stomach aches as a child, and that continued into adulthood, that withholding. So I was always like super constipated because I was holding everything down. And that then, coming into adulthood, um, not using my voice, right? Silencing myself. So really, all the withholding became normalized for me, and it was across the board, right? Whether it's not releasing my bowels, whether it's like holding my bodily functions, whether it was holding my voice, holding back my emotions, my holding back my opinions and
Hmm.
perspective, withholding my contribution in a meeting,
Right.
withholding my
In
talent.
all
So
angles, from all
oh yeah,
angles and
in
all.
all angles across the board, that's what I did.
Okay, and so tell me, how did that show up in how you, like, personal interactions or personal relationships with people?
Yeah, I wouldn't fully show up and I would withhold myself from them. So even people who have known me a really long time would be like, I know you, but I don't feel like I really know you.
Hmm.
Right. So that became, like a way of, for me, I experienced that as a way of protecting myself and
Hmm.
keeping myself safe. And it wasn't personal
Hmm.
to anyone else. It wasn't meant as a slight or in any way, shape, or form. It was just the way I had grown accustomed to
Right.
being, right?
So
It
how
became
did you
habit.
Yeah, so then how did you let people into your world? How did you let them in? Who did you let in?
Very, very, well, I would let people, so if you can imagine almost like concentric circles.
Mhm.
So I would let you in increments, right? But no one ever got to the core. No one ever got to my inner sanctum. It never occurred to me to let people in to that point because that space felt sacred to me. So I would have even, in my previous marriage with my ex-husband, um, he only knew me so much.
Well, how
And
did you
I
let him
believe
into your world? Because that
my
does,
my
that is still an intimate connection of
yes.
allowing someone in quite deeply,
Hmm.
even if you're not fully letting them in. How did you do
Yeah.
it?
Well, how did I do it? Well, I would watch people for a really long time
Mhm.
and determine whether or not they felt safe to me. And then I would let them in terms of sharing about myself, whether or not you knew you were in if you've ever been in my home. There are
Mhm.
many people I've known for a really long time who have never stepped foot beyond my
Mhm.
threshold. And so if I let you into my home, then that meant that, I've let you into my heart. So that was a way I could also tell my comfort level with someone and whether or
Mhm.
not, so the fact that I would be in a relationship with someone, whether it be in friendship, like romantically or platonic,
Mhm.
um, I love people, right? And
Mhm.
I had that desire to want closeness with them, right?
Mhm.
But at the same time, I had that story of you can't really trust people because if they see you for who you are, Rachel,
Mhm.
they
Mhm.
might judge you, they might harm you, right? And you don't need that. So that's how that was my inner conversation,
Mhm.
and so I always got encouragement from my spiritual mentor, like my guide, to say
Mhm.
open up. They were always encouraging me to open up. Yet, I had like one foot on the gas and one on the brakes, right?
Right.
Like it was like,
You're half in and
yeah,
half out.
yes,
Okay.
I was sitting on the
Yes.
fence.
Okay.
And yeah. But for those
Mhm.
like in my life, like if you ask them, they'd be like, oh, yeah, Rachel and I are super tight because my level of intimacy and intensity was so rich
Right.
that they just thought, well, that feels like other things I have in the world. So it must be that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, little do you know just how much deeper we
Right.
can go. Right.
Yeah.
And I kind of
Right.
held that as my little secret of
Mm.
what I could do and who I could become in a
Right.
relationship. Um, yeah. And so I withheld myself from the world.
It's interesting that you said like your dirty little secret because
Yeah.
in the introduction of the podcast, we talk about it as like the way sometimes it's viewed is like it's a dirty little secret. So we want to withhold and we want to keep things away from people and not share
Yes.
because we don't want to be shamed. And sometimes we're shaming ourselves in the process, unknowingly,
Yes.
unintentionally.
Mhm.
But isn't that interesting, right? That dirty little secret.
Yeah, there's a lot going on
Mm-hmm.
in my mind, and it was that
Mm-hmm.
oscillation between, um, well, Rachel, what is true, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is true
Mm-hmm.
for you versus what you have been told is true,
Right.
and what is your
Mm-hmm.
experience? And as I said, I never permitted myself to believe and live from that space.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the what I kept telling myself was that the
Mm-hmm.
moment I truly step out and reveal, I mean, if my mother couldn't handle it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and she loves me,
Right.
right? Why am I even bothering to even think that anyone else out there would be okay with
Right.
me? Like,
So
why?
another suggestion, another layer of a suggestion. So, in a private conversation, you and I talked about, or it was mentioned, that in this first marriage, there were some struggles that you encountered as a result of like there was like limitations that you faced as a result of you not feeling like you could show up completely as who you were. Can you speak a little bit to that in terms of how this relationship unfolded? The limitations you faced and how you were affected in that space?
Yes. So let's go there, Salima.
Okay. Mhm.
So in this relationship, this was years ago, and we were together for in total probably about 14 years. And this was like,
Mhm.
one of my, I would say, my first serious adult relationship. And I felt so grateful that someone saw me
Mhm.
and wanted to be with me, right?
Mhm.
And that speaks to a worthiness piece. Even though I knew I was all that,
Mhm.
I think in within the relationship, I was just, yeah, I would say I just felt so happy to be with someone with whom I could share really deep spiritual ideas and speak on things that I wouldn't necessarily do so with like my colleagues at work, or,
Mhm.
and for them not to look at me sideways and question my sanity, right? And like, begin to undermine my every effort and question my being. So that was like the conversation. Yet, what ended up happening was that's exactly what it ended up being, where I started second guessing myself because of
Mhm.
just it started very softly and lightly of,
Okay.
no, you're not allowed to express yourself fully.
Right.
Whether and it the
So
first
just like the
experience.
self-limiting, like just you're not even giving
Yes.
yourself permission to
Yes.
show up
So
any different way.
exactly. So I
Okay.
thought the coast was clear
Right.
and I could, it's like, it's over, you can come out. And so I
Right.
came out within what I perceived to be the safety of this relationship. And
Right.
what I learned very quickly
Mhm.
was that it was not so. It was not safe to do so. And that my ideas and my um, who who I was being,
Mhm.
in terms of being bold and being
Mhm.
expressive
Mhm.
and being passionate and being so, what I experienced was sexually, this was not, I was immediately um, like shut down, right? So
Mhm.
what,
Do you mean do you mean to say that, it's like you you were close, like, how you mentioned previously, people only knew an ounce of who you really were, like in terms of that distance that you
yes.
kept between you and others because it
Hmm.
wasn't safe. Do you mean to say that, like, you opened that boundary a little bit more, so you were risking and
Yes.
going outside of those bounds, because this is my husband. This is
Yes.
I'm supposed to expose
Yes.
more. And so what
Yes.
you're saying to me is that when you exposed yourself a bit more, it didn't go so well.
It didn't go well at all.
Okay.
And I got shut down and judged and basically correct, like, what's the word when you chastised, right? I
Mm.
was chastised for being um like, you know unchristian or dirty, right? Just
Mhm.
for being a sexual being, right?
Mhm.
For being, sexually expressing myself and my desire, right? To
Mhm.
actually enjoy being intimate. And it's like, no, you don't do that, right? Like, just
Mm.
basically don't participate.
Mhm.
Right? I don't want your input in this. Just, basically just lie there and play dead. And I'm like, okay, this does not feel honoring to me. So all of this, it's like I knew, um like, okay, this is not what I thought I was signing up for, but okay, but this person is my best friend now. Like, this person
Right.
says they love me
Right.
now, and I've invested so much time in this relationship
Right.
now, that how can it not, okay, maybe it's just, maybe I started questioning, like, maybe I'm just being too extra. Maybe I just, get to look at this from a different angle and take what works and leave the rest. So if the sex piece is not great, then let me at least embrace the other things, right? And go all in on that and just be happy with that because they love me, right? And I
Mhm.
think I can trust that. So, but then, over time, it just bled into everything else, where it was very clear and very, they had shared that essentially I don't get a vote. Like, just be there. Like, you can just be in this relationship, but I don't want the distraction of you being you, was the
Mhm.
message, right? Which was
Okay.
really jarring because I
Mhm.
was still trying to make sense
Mhm.
of how to fix this,
Right.
right? How
It's
do I
almost like
fix me to
yeah,
fix this?
it's like I'm hearing you say while you're trying to fix, you're continuously trying to modify and adjust yourself.
Yes.
So even though you might have thought at some point you're being bold and you're using your voice, but you were not really being true to yourself and
No.
sticking honoring your true process.
Not at all. Not at all. And
Mhm.
through it all, and I'd have like, conversations with my guide, and I knew I'm like, this does not feel right, but it also doesn't feel complete. Like it doesn't feel over, right? Like it
Mhm.
doesn't feel over. So, what do I need to know about this? Like, is this for me? Is it, I had a lot of questions. I had a
Mhm.
lot of questions because I felt alone, right? And I felt so it's one thing to feel alone, and I've felt that before, but I'd never
Mhm.
felt lonely
Mhm.
before,
Mhm.
quite in
Mhm.
the way that I did within a marriage, right?
Right.
Like
So it's like a
that's
deeper
a
sense of loneliness
that's
because
a
now you're
next level.
yeah, it's like next level and it's like people expect that you are connected because it's your husband.
Yeah.
And so maybe people even check in less or
Yes.
assume you have it going for you.
And he was really fantastic at the show, right? So he was
Mm,
always outwardly affectionate,
right.
right? He was just like, "Oh, my wife is the best," and just like fawning. He was so like, and
That must
these,
have been so
gr-
confusing for you,
it was grand
right?
gestures,
Okay.
epic experiences,
Mhm.
so it made it impossible. So, as we went through this whole experience, as I said, we were together for 14 years, and I was just like scratching my head, going, how can this be? Right. Which is
Mhm.
why I'm like, okay, it makes no sense. He's saying this, but he's being this. Right. So
Mhm.
there was no alignment and no, it just wasn't, it was incongruent.
Right.
And we would have conversations about it, and I would ask about it, but he would also do a disappearing act where when I started chipping away too close at whatever his secret was, he would bail and he would disappear for like days at a time.
Mhm.
And I didn't feel that I was allowed to expect an answer. Like I would ask a question, but I am under no obligation to answer you, Rachel. And there
Mm.
was all this
There's a lot of
secrecy,
rules, lots of
a
rules you
lot of
had to
rules, and
follow.
yeah, and I described it as walking on eggshells.
Right.
And then eggshells became a minefield because then the wrong question at the wrong time on the wrong day when the moon was just right would
Mhm.
mean that, now it's your fault. So it's almost as if I felt like it was the perfect setup every time where
Mhm.
crap would happen and then I would question said crap only to find out it was a trap so that they could bail and then blame me and leave me holding like a steaming
Mm.
bag of poo, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it was this cycle that just kept repeating itself and every
Cyclical, and it
time,
became cyclical for you.
oh, and every
Wow.
time I would just go deeper and deeper into the sense of how is this my life?
Right.
Right? And how did I get here? Right? Because
Mhm.
I just I didn't get it. I didn't get it. And but it was what it was. And I couldn't, and then he was amazing at apologies, right? Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry I bailed on you or ghosted you. And it's just that, it's hard for me to, you know, be honest with you if I'm not being honest with myself. So it's not you, it's me. And he'll like super explain it. And I'll be like, oh, okay, well, because you have awareness around what it is that's happening, then there's hope.
Yeah, so I mean, you felt hope, but it was such a
Oh
a
my
false
God.
sense of hope, right? There's all that accommodating
Yeah.
that you were doing, and it almost sounds like there was like a few elements of like gaslighting in there or some
I would say
manipulating,
like that term,
you know,
I wasn't aware of that term at that
at the
time.
time. Yes, right.
Um, but when I did, like, once I became aware of it, in the last few years, I'm like, that was so my life.
Right. Right.
I'm like,
Like
now I
that
have a word.
describes it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And the crazy piece, was that I he had my family enrolled, right?
Oh.
So then I felt really alone and lonely because they knew me as being, speak your mind, bold, right?
Mhm.
But they described it as rude. Rachel, you can be very rude. So that was the
Right.
judgment around it. So now when my ex, now, would express that, or like something would happen, or there'd be a falling out, the automatic default is Rachel must have done something. So once he latched on to that, it didn't matter how accommodating I was being within the relationship, to the point where I became unrecognizable to myself. I twisted myself into a pretzel of like
Mm.
compromise,
Mhm.
that even my family was now like rooting for him because they couldn't see the game,
Right.
because he wouldn't show that part of it. It's like Jekyll and Hyde.
Right.
He wouldn't show that part, and all they would see is just my reactions and my response, and judge me based on what they believed
Right.
me to be, right? So, and he
Mhm.
used that. It was masterful, masterful, and he was, in his survival mode too. So it was just not a great situation.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like there was so many like tiny pieces that really together combine like so much. And as you said, I think at the beginning of our conversation, somewhere in the beginning, you said that, at the heart of all of it, there's all this hiding that I've been doing, but that
Yes,
there were several arms of this, right? And so
yes,
even the marriage being one arm, I feel like there were all like I think of an octopus, like all the multiple,
yes,
like
exactly.
all these additional like tiny arms, going into all these
Yes,
little tiny directions.
tentacles. Yes.
Yes, exactly. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, wow, that is so wild that
Yeah.
I can't imagine what you were going through and how you did it. But hats off to you for working that process, like I'm just beside myself as I I can't put myself in your shoes. I did not experience that. I don't know, but I'm just like the whole time I'm thinking brave, courageous, outrageously courageous, thinking all these things these thoughts are just
Oh.
coming to me as you share. That gets me curious,
Mhm.
Rachel, when people come to see me for therapy, people are typically in one of three places. Some
Mhm.
people are getting started, some are in the middle, and some are looking back, right? What I mean by these three phases is that sometimes people are getting started, meaning they don't know what they're supposed to work on, but they know they're supposed to work on themselves. But sometimes people have quite a number of messes that they are now ready to delayer and work through. Some people are in the middle, or maybe there's something acute that they're working on, while they also are aware that there's a lot of unfinished business in their life, or a lot of untapped grief, or different elements of their life that have really need to be explored. And some people are looking back, they've moved through a lot and accepted a number of circumstances, but also recognize that I need some closure, I need to get some understanding so that I can move
Mhm.
forward or move into the next chapter of what's to come. So based on that, what part of your untold story journey would you say that you're in? Would you say that you're getting started? Would you say you're in the middle, or looking back?
Wow. I would say, as a last ditch effort, Salima,
Mhm,
I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go and enroll and study psychotherapy so I can get my shit together.
mhm,
Um,
mhm,
and through that journey, um, was my liberation, right? Where I came
mhm,
face to face with, that's my healing journey.
Mhm.
That's how all of that started. And, seeing myself in the data and all of this work. And so I see myself looking back at what had happened and what I've experienced and what I've lived through, yet I also see the reverberations in my
Right.
current life, right? It's almost like, transformation in phases. So I
Mhm.
went through the initial, I'm looking back at, yes, that's what I was in, that's how I came through, this is who I was, and this is who I am now.
Mhm.
And then I now see all those pieces still, like those remnants. And now I get to dive deep into those and unpack them, which brings me
Mhm.
to the, coming out of hiding, right? Because through that, I was still hiding. Even when I came out of the relationship, I was still hiding. So there are elements of my past that are still very much in play today.
But going back to this question and you mentioning, "Oh, well, with my ex, I don't believe I've ever, stepped into, full closure." But where in the journey would you say you are?
I would say I'm looking back
Okay.
at it, and still working on pieces that I
Mhm.
almost like shrapnel, right? I see that
Okay.
as, because those were analogies I used while I was in the relationship where I'm like, I felt as if I was being taken out by friendly fire, right?
Mhm.
I'm here, battling life, looking out into the world of where I don't fit in. And
Mhm.
yet I'm in the pit and you're firing at me. Like, how is
Mhm.
this to be? So I see myself looking back, but at the same time, very aware of the shrapnel that is still
Right.
coming out, right?
Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm picking them out, right? And seeing how that informs my current relationship because I've since remarried and how now I have we have three beautiful children and
Mhm.
every time I look at them I'm reminded of the childlessness, right, the
Right.
lack of fruit in my
Right.
previous marriage.
Mhm.
So it's like that weird juxtaposition of past colliding with the present every
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And if we can just circle back for a moment, we've talked about so many arms of your story and even at the crux of this theme of your supernatural gift and embracing it and that the bigger theme of neglect and hiding so much of you and for
Hmm.
so long and in so many ways and with so many people and in the different environments that you've been. Let's pivot for a moment and tell me how this untold story has affected your mental well-being.
At that time, my mental health, um, I felt arrested. I felt stuck. I felt I was just steeped in self doubt. I ruminated a lot. Like I was just not really thinking, just ruminating. I was just like it churning in this soup of, you know, just confusion. And I didn't feel connected to myself because I numbed out to a large extent where I'm like, as long as I can't feel, then I won't feel pain. And then I can just, put one foot in front of the other. And so just the mental head game I was playing on myself in order to just survive. So I was just living in survival mode and, just never connecting to anyone or anything too deeply. So I wouldn't fully commit. So I was definitely a commitment phobe. Even though my desire was to be in these like deep, rich, long lasting relationships.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so I would be in that, but then mentally, um, I would just be just going around in
mhm,
circles, chasing my
mhm.
tail and questioning everything because I didn't feel trust,
Right.
right? And so that translated into a lot of stress would be an understatement,
Yeah. Yeah.
anxiety, but at the time I wasn't, if you had asked me,
You might not have known what you were experiencing at the time, but now reflecting back, you can recall and say,
yeah,
"Yeah, at that time, this is how I can tell you what I was experiencing."
yeah. At the time, I just
Mhm.
felt very alone, very isolated.
Mhm.
And as
Mhm.
I said, lonely, where, I'm like, how can that be? Very confused. And because I felt as if I was in a holding pattern, because
Mhm.
I'd alluded, I felt stuck. So then that rippled out into my life, which looked
Mhm.
like being stuck in my career, being,
Mhm.
it affected my relationship with money.
Mhm.
I didn't feel confident planning for the future
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
everything in the present felt so uncertain. And
Mhm.
then I became, very, I removed myself from social situations. So
Mhm.
even though I had this ability to be very like social, and you put me in you'd think I was like super, super extrovert,
Yeah.
I just disappeared inside myself, and I
Right.
wouldn't go out. I wouldn't meet up with friends.
Mhm.
I'm like, it's just easier because I don't want to have to explain myself.
Mhm.
I don't want to have to explain how I'm feeling because, I don't
Mhm.
have language for it. I just
Mhm.
know that I don't feel like myself. So I felt like I was in a prison. I didn't
Mm.
feel free. And one of my big, through lines is my freedom, like nothing messing with my sense of freedom.
Mhm.
And I found myself in a situation where I did not feel free to do anything, to
Right.
be myself, to
Mhm.
go for anything. I stayed very, very small.
Mhm.
And even
Mhm.
that was not enough.
It's definitely a roller coaster. A lot of different emotion, a lot of different thought processes, a lot of impact to your mental well-being. So many hurdles and so many moments of turmoil. And it didn't just show up one at a time. It sounds like
No.
sometimes it showed up in the most complicated way. So what's your key message to the listeners of our show, Rachel? What do you want them to know?
Um, I would say, who you are is legitimate and you are more than enough.
Mhm.
That's something that I came to terms with, which is, hence my headline, Supernatural Woman Comes Out of Hiding to Tell All.
Mhm.
Um, it's not about pleasing others or being palatable to others, or, making sure that others are okay at, at my personal
Mhm.
cost. Um, and I have a place in this world. And that's the message I would share with others of you are who you are and you
Mhm.
have a place in this world and
Mhm.
you're more than enough.
I love it. That's beautiful. Share with us what was game changing? What was pivotal for you? Like, what was that game changing inspiration that's close to you that reflects your untold story that really sort of got you moving in the direction that you needed to go? So, was there like an inspirational quote or a book or something that spoke to you?
The one that comes to mind is speak the truth and leave immediately after. And that has just always been with me. Sometimes I understand it and sometimes I don't. But it has been a constant of speak the truth, like be yourself, speak your truth.
Mm-hmm.
And leave immediately after is like you don't owe anyone an explanation.
Right.
You do you and you live your life.
How powerful and insightful. So, what is a cause or an organization that's been impactful to you that you really would like to give a shout out to? Who would that be?
Yes, I would love. Thank you so much for giving that opportunity, Salima. One
Mhm.
organization I would say is Dr. Roz's Healing Place. It's a center for, the empowerment and healing of women and their
Mhm.
children fleeing
Mhm.
domestic violence. And
Mm.
so my experience there really revealed because in doing that work and working with the women and being on the board, I began to see myself in the data because
That's so lovely.
I would not have known that I was in an abusive relationship because it was
Mm.
so, insidious, right?
Right.
But in dealing with, the data and the research and all the information and surrounding, just like hearing all the stories, and I began to see myself in the data. And so, big shout out to Dr. Roz's Healing Place.
Mhm. That
Yes.
is such a wonderful resource, and I can see how personally we've been impacted by it so much, and it's been so anchoring for you in your process. Rachel, guess what?
Yes.
You've just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
What? Oh my goodness, Salima, this is so, yeah, I feel seen.
Mm.
I feel like just free, that there's such a platform that you've created to be able to tell these, that I've been able to share my story that has been under lock and key, and and to put it out in the world. That's definitely my headline.
Well, I really appreciate that feedback, and I appreciate that you're taking from this what the intention is meant to be. So for me, it's food for my soul also. So thank you so
Oh,
much for saying that. And Rachel, I would actually just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for the story that you've shared today. All of the many arms, you finding your inner voice, embracing your gifts, and most importantly, really taking the time to share that pain and share that turmoil that you grappled with as you sorted through your very own path. It has been so inspiring. I'm really grateful that I have been able to hear and witness your story today. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all the daring and sharing. That really took some bravery.
thank you so much, Salima, for your platform. Thank you for um, creating that space, that safe space to be able to share.
Thank you. Once again, Rachel, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.